other things that are on the table. Florida just voted down a full-on, quote-unquote, assault weapons ban. It wasn't an assault weapons ban. That's bad media coverage again. Instead, it was actually a ban on AR-15s. AR-15s are not assault weapons. Okay? Assault weapons are a legally dubious definition. There's no clear definition of what constitutes an assault weapon. An AR-15 is just a high-grade rifle. That's all it is. But if you add a few gadgets to it, it becomes an assault weapon. If you have like a pistol grip to a rifle, then in some cases that becomes an assault weapon. If you add a sight to it, sometimes it becomes an assault weapon. If it's painted black as opposed to being brown, sometimes that's an assault weapon. In any case, this made a lot of media, garnered a lot of media attention because a bunch of the students from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School went to Florida lawmakers in Tallahassee and asked for a full ban on the AR-15. The final motion vote was 36-71, so it was overwhelmingly voted down. The Democratic Representative Keon McGee asked for a procedural move that would have allowed it to consider the bill to ban, quote, assault rifles and large capacity magazines. The bill had been assigned to 3 committees but was not scheduled for a hearing. So the House will determine whether they choose to do that or not. Obviously, the media ran with the photos of the weeping students because they want to generate sympathy for the anti-gun agenda. This doesn't mean the students should be mocked, as Dinesh did yesterday, obviously. I understand that kids have really strong feelings everyone has very strong feelings about these issues, and these kids just went through a trauma. That's why I'm not in favor of what I think is media exploitation of people who just went through a tragedy in order to gin up sympathy for a particular agenda. I think that the media only does this, again, with particular circumstances. They didn't do it after the Boston bombing. They didn't have big town halls with victims of the Boston bombing talking about immigration policy, for example. But they do this every time there is a gun an issue of gun violence that crops up. By the way, worthwhile noting here that some of the statistics that have been going around with regard to mass shootings in the United States are just dead wrong. As I've explained before, it is just not true. It is a falsity that there were 18 mass shootings in the United States in January. It's not true. It was more like 2. That's horrible, but it's not 18. Also, it's been promoted by the media that the United States is the only advanced country in which mass violence occurs, that mass shootings occur. That is not true. If you actually look per capita, mass shootings, the United States actually comes in 11th. So the way that you calculate that, this is the Crime Prevention Research Center headed by economist John Lott, who's famously the author of More Guns, Less Crime, which has been true in the United States for a while. The gun murder rate has been declining rapidly in the United States for the last 20 years, even though the number of guns in circulation in the United States has been rising rapidly for the last 20 years. John Lott says that the U.S. does not lead the world in mass shootings. In fact, it doesn't even make the top 10 when you measure death rate per million population from mass public shootings. Now, to be fair, there's a fair margin of error here because mass shootings everywhere are pretty rare. When you have a country of 330 million people and let's say 100 people a year are killed in mass shootings, which is very high. That's not high. That number is a lot higher than it actually is in the United States. That recedes into margin of error territory. But if you look at 2009 through 2015, if you look at the top death rate per million people from mass public shootings, it goes Norway, Serbia, France, Macedonia, Albania, Slovakia, Switzerland, Finland, Belgium, Czech Republic, and then the United States. Also, as far as frequency, that is also not true. The U.S. ranks 12th compared to European countries in terms of frequency per capita. Now, per capita matters because the United States is a very large country with a lot of people. And so you're going to have to measure the rate of violence in the United States as opposed to rates of violence per capita in other European countries. So don't buy into the notion that the United States is replete with mass shootings. They're happening every day on every corner. Does that mean that there's nothing we can do to stop it? No, of course it doesn't mean that. I've suggested on this program multiple things we can do, ranging from better security in school situations to the gun violence restraining orders promoted by David French over at National Review, in which family members can apply to the court to have your capacity to buy a gun or own a gun temporarily removed from you if you're a danger to yourself or others. But that's not enough. The left just wants to shout about how everybody who doesn't agree with them is a bad person, and they're not going to stop until that happens. This is a fool's errand for the White House. So the White House is going to hold a listening session with students, according to Sarah Huckabee Sanders. This is because the media have been putting a lot of pressure on the White House saying, you're not listening to the victims, you're not listening to the victims. Again, I don't remember anybody doing this with Barack Obama and, for example, the victims in Benghazi. I don't remember them doing this with the victims of the Boston bombing. I don't remember the family of the beheaded by ISIS doing this with Barack Obama. But I guess we have to do this with President Trump. Sarah Huckabee Sanders says Trump is actually going to get in a room with a lot of these students and presumably take it from them. Trump is actually good at this. It'll be good for Trump politically. You know, the aftermath probably won't be heavy gun legislation, But it's smart of him politically to get in a room with these kids because Trump, contrary to popular opinion, does have a capacity for sympathy when he is listening to people one-on-one, as virtually everyone who's dealt with him one-on-one will tell you. Here's Sarah Huckabee Sanders announcing this.
Tomorrow we will be hosting parents, teachers, and students here at the White House to discuss efforts to ensure safety at our schools. Members of the Parkland community will be attending this listening session, as will individuals who were impacted by past school shootings, including the Columbine and Sandy Hook tragedies. On Thursday, we will be hosting local officials, including members of the law enforcement community, to continue that conversation. As the president has said many times, it is the right of every American child to grow up in a safe community. That begins in America's neighborhoods.
Okay, so this is, I think, a smart move by the Trump administration to demonstrate that there's no lack of sympathy, even if there is a lack of agreement on public policy. Some of the agreement on public policy, the lack of agreement, is coming from the fact that folks on the left refuse to even consider possibilities that they haven't thought about, right? So Doug Jones, the senator from Alabama, he was asked about the possibility of arming teachers. And I've said that I think the teachers who are trained and qualified should be able to carry firearms. Doug Jones says, oh, that's idiotic. We shouldn't arm teachers. I'm not even going to consider it.
Arming teachers in schools, and that's an idea that Representative Bradley Byrne and Senator Doug Jones have different opinions about.
There are some teachers that I think could be appropriately armed if they have the training and they feel comfortable doing it. I certainly wouldn't want to require them to do it if they don't feel comfortable with it.
I think that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. I think it's crazy. You don't need to arm America in order to stop this.
Well, actually, you do need to arm Americans in order to stop mass shooters, because it's always the police who stop the mass shooters. But again, this debate is so dishonest and it's so yucky, and really it churns your guts because there are so many people who are not willing to lend the other side the credibility of hearing out their proposals, or willing to acknowledge that people on the other side of the issue may in fact care about children being killed. Okay, so speaking of media bias, let's talk a little bit about a new poll that's out with regard to the GOP tax cut. So there's a brand new poll that's out, and it shows that the GOP tax cut is up to 51% support overall from 37% in December, 89% among Republicans, and 19% among Democrats. Okay, that is a massive growth in the level of support for the tax cuts. And one of the reasons is because people are finally starting to see the tax cuts hit their paycheck. They got their February paycheck, and the tax cuts were present in the paycheck. And so suddenly it's more popular. It also goes to show you the level of media lies and malfeasance on the tax cut. And you could see that at the time. I talked about this while they were passing the tax cut. You could actually see in the polls, the vast majority of the American public thought they would not receive a tax cut. Still, only 35% of the American public believes that they're going to receive a tax cut. It's closer to 80 to 90% of the American public. And then the media wonder why we don't trust them, why we think that they're biased on these issues. They are biased on these issues. And I'll show you how biased they are also on the Trump-Russia stuff in just a second. But first, you're going to have to go over to dailywire.com and subscribe. For $9.99 a month, you can get a subscription to dailywire.com. When you do, you get the rest of our show live. You get the rest of the Andrew Klavan show live, the rest of the Michael Knowles show live. Thank you, by the way, to all those folks who are oversubscribing at Andrew Klavan's show. He was up to the top 10, I believe, or close to the top 10 on iTunes overnight, which is just fantastic. His show is definitely worth the listen and worth the subscribership. But also subscribe at dailywire.com for $9.99 a month, and you can get his entire show live, be part of his mailbag. If you want all of that, plus the world-famous Leftist Tears hot or cold tumbler, check that out over at dailywire.com. The annual subscription gets you it's $99 a year instead of $9.99 a month. You save $20 off the regular subscription price, and you get that fabulous beverage vessel. You just want to listen later? Go over to iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher, any of the places you get your podcast. You can get the Ben Shapiro Show. Subscribe, leave us a